So here now is Washington Examiner's Sarah Bedford and attorney Brian Claypool. Now, Brian, I want to start with you because we're talking about the legal stuff here. Is this one Democratic Secretary of State making a decision on a crime that was never charged and by a very aggressive prosecutor, I might say, Jack Smith? What do you think about that?
Yeah, hey, look, this is more of a loud bark, but very little bite. I think this is more of a symbolic gesture by Bellows. If you analyze what's going to happen next, former President Trump's filed an appeal. That means there's got to be a court hearing by January 17th and a ruling. Then, let's assume that's adverse. Then there's going to be an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Why is that important? Because the primary, Edward, is March 5th in Maine. And that means that former President Trump has to stay on the ballot while this is under appeal. So there's very little teeth in what she's done, and I think it's more just a symbolic gesture. And Ron DeSantis is right. Due process, and like you just said, President Trump was never even charged with a federal insurrection crime. Right. So how is it that he can be prevented from being on a ballot for a crime he was never charged with?
So I want to go to Sarah, who's sitting here with me. Sarah, every time the Democrats charge or go after the former president, it seems, or with the government funds or government use, it seems that he gets more popular among his base. Is that going to happen here?
There's no reason to think it wouldn't, right? It's happened every time that he's faced an indictment or otherwise seemingly been targeted by Democrats in the Biden administration. And, you know, I think it pushes voters who are maybe on the fence about him or on the margins into his camp, right? Maybe centrist voters or independents who thought all these years Donald Trump was crying wolf about being the victim of witch hunts. They have to concede that he is seemingly being targeted by all these different apparatuses of the Democratic machine. And it's hard to argue against this idea that he is being politically persecuted when you have these courts, these Democratic elected officials, the Biden DOJ, using novel interpretations of the law that have never been tried before in what seems like a desperate attempt to keep him off the ballot. I do think this is going to help him politically.
So, Brian, I want to get to you. The U.S. Supreme Court, as you talked about, has to get involved in this. How fast do you think that they're going to make a decision? And then what message do you believe justices need to send?
Yeah, Edward, great question. I mean, the primaries are March 5th. Like in Maine, Colorado, they've got to start sending out ballots by the end of January. So I would think that the U.S. Supreme Court needs to jump in and make a ruling before ballots are sent out by late January. I can't imagine the Supreme Court waiting any longer than that, and most certainly before the March 5th primary. And I think the message that the Supreme Court is going to send, and by the way, it's 6-3. It's a conservative Supreme Court, 3 of the justices appointed by former President Trump. But the message they have to send is the supremacy clause, right? That the federal courts, the federal regulations, that applies. That supersedes any rulings by state courts, and that states can't engage in politics to try to promote a political agenda. And that's what I think they're going to have to talk about in their ruling.
Yeah, and otherwise we could be looking at a slippery slope here. And Sarah, President Joe Biden talks about saving democracy. You know, we're looking at, you talked about the government approach going after his opponent, who is leading in the polls on the other side of the primary. You know, this is Democratic-controlled areas that are going after him. Is this a threat to our democracy?
Well, I think, yeah, any objective observer could say that keeping someone off the ballot and denying voters a choice in the name of democracy is sort of a self-defeating situation. I also think you don't hear Joe Biden and the Democrats talking as much about democracy anymore. They really are just focusing in on describing Donald Trump as a threat himself, talking about how he engaged in insurrection. I don't think that you really hear a lot of rhetoric from Democrats right now about voting rights or the integrity of democracy and protecting it, because that rhetoric would be completely at odds with what that we're seeing. So we're seeing a lot more fear-mongering about the supposed threat that Donald Trump poses. And it's interesting that that democracy rhetoric that was so present, you know, during the midterms and earlier, we're just not hearing that right now from the Democrats.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And Brian, you talked about a little bit the Maine Secretary of State decision. What legal grounds did she use? And what do you think about that line of thinking in there?
Yeah, you know, I'm a trial attorney, right? Last time I checked, before anybody issues a ruling, right, there's evidence that's heard in a courtroom, and then somebody decides, usually a jury. So that's the problem I have with this most, is that, Shanna Bello, she claims she had an administrative hearing on this, but President Trump's people weren't there. Evidence wasn't presented on his behalf to refute these allegations. Basically what she said, Edward, is, President Trump made some incendiary comments that led to people charging the Capitol building on January 6th, and that he lit a fire to cause this. I mean, the DOJ investigated this, Edward. They did not find enough evidence to charge former President Trump with what Shanna Bellows is saying he did wrong. So, I mean, it really flies in the face of reality, and it flies in the face of having a fair judicial process.
Yeah, and Brian, Sarah, I appreciate it. We'll have to see when the Supreme Court weighs in, because it seems like everybody believes they will at some point. You guys have a great year. Happy New Year.
You bet. Happy New Year.